There's a version of you that everyone else sees. You showed up. You smiled when you were supposed to. You made the small talk and laughed at the right moments. And then, somewhere between the third conversation and the noise rising to a level you couldn't quite locate, something inside you started quietly counting the exits. Not because anything went wrong, not because anyone was unkind, but because there's a particular weight that crowds place on certain people, a kind of invisible pressure that builds in the chest, and most people around you seem to carry it just fine. They're laughing, they're leaning in, they're ordering another round. They seem to be fueled by this, and you're sitting there wondering why you're so exhausted before you've even left. You'll drive home later, maybe not even saying much, and something in you will finally unclench. The quiet will feel like water. You'll breathe differently. You'll think more clearly. And you might wonder, the way you always wonder, what is wrong with me? You were there. You stayed. You did everything right. And still, you feel like the crowd took something from you that it didn't take from anyone else. What if nothing was taken? What if something was simply noticed, more than most people notice, all at once? Most people assume this comes from shyness, from social anxiety, from some quiet damage that made the world feel like too much. But that's not the full truth, rarely the whole story. Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes the people who struggle most in crowds are the ones who are taking in the most, processing everything more deeply. Every face, every shift in tone, every undercurrent in the room. Psychologist Elaine Aron at Stony Brook University identified a temperament trait called sensory processing sensitivity. Across a series of studies, her research found that roughly 1 in 5 people are wired to process environmental and emotional information more deeply than others, registering subtle stimuli that most people simply don't notice at a conscious level. Not broken, not damaged, not shy, more finely tuned. What if hating crowds isn't a failure to enjoy life? What if it's the signature of a nervous system that experiences life, all of it, more completely? Here is what actually happens when you walk into a crowd. Your nervous system starts taking inventory. The lighting, the temperature shift, the competing conversations, the subtle social hierarchies forming and dissolving in real time. The person across the room whose body language says one thing while their words say another. Something you can feel without quite knowing why. For most people, most of this passes below the threshold of attention. It's background noise. For you, it isn't background. It's all foreground. Simultaneously, your chest tightens, not with fear, but with load. The same way a computer slows when too many processes are running at once. Nothing is wrong with the hardware. There's just a lot happening. More than the room acknowledges, more than anyone else seems to be carrying. And then comes the strange loneliness of it. You're surrounded by people, and somehow more alone than you are when you're by yourself, because being by yourself doesn't require this much of you. That's not antisocial, that's not cold, that's a specific kind of exhaustion that only certain nervous systems produce. This didn't come from nowhere. Many people who grow up with higher environmental sensitivity learn early that the world is a loud place, and they are the ones responsible for managing it. You learned to read rooms before you could name what you were doing. You noticed when the adults around you were tense before anyone said a word. You felt the mood of a space the way other children felt temperature, immediately, involuntarily, in your body. Crowds were harder then too. Birthday parties with too many children, school hallways between classes, family gatherings where everyone expected you to be present and joyful. And you were present. Just in a way that exhausted you because you were present to everything. And because no one explained what was happening, because the adults around you didn't have the language for it, You came up with your own explanation. Something must be wrong with me. I must not like people. I must be difficult. That explanation was wrong. You weren't difficult. You were precise. Your nervous system was doing more work than anyone could see, in every crowded room you ever entered. Here's why this is not a character flaw. Here is what's happening in your brain. Research in evolutionary biology, reviewed by Aron and colleagues in the journal Personality and Social Psychology Review, found evidence that this trait of heightened environmental sensitivity exists across more than 100 non-human species. It is not unique to humans. It is ancient, and it has never been eliminated by natural selection, because it carries real advantages. The highly sensitive nervous system is better at detecting subtle threats, noticing small changes in the environment, processing complex social information deeply before acting. In environments where careful observation mattered, where reading the situation before moving could be the difference between safety and danger, this was not a weakness. It was a specialized function. A crowd in that older world meant something different. It meant a temporary convergence of people in unusual numbers, something that warranted careful attention. Your nervous system still responds that way. It hasn't misread the situation. It's running a program that made perfect sense for a very long time. It still makes sense. It's just that the world now asks you to run that program constantly. In open offices, packed trains, loud restaurants, as though the program has no cost. It has a cost. That cost is real, and it says nothing about your worth. We live in an era that was not designed for the nervous system you have. Open-plan workspaces, concerts and festivals as the default form of celebration. The assumption that a good time is a full room. That more people means more life. Culture has, with very little subtlety, decided that stimulation is the point. The ideal person in this framework is energized by crowds. They are recharged by events. They leave parties feeling fuller than they arrived. And if you are not that person, if the party drains rather than fills, culture has a ready explanation waiting for you. You're introverted. You're antisocial. You're no fun. You need to come out of your shell. These are not diagnoses. They are judgments shaped by a world that decided one kind of nervous system is the default, and everything else is a deviation. But roughly 1 in 4 people, as research published in Translational Psychiatry found when studying over 900 adults, fall into what researchers call the highly sensitive group. That is not a small minority with a problem. That is a significant portion of the human population, doing more work in every noisy room than the people beside them will ever realise. Understanding this changes something. Not dramatically, not all at once, but something shifts when you realise that the exhaustion you feel in crowds is not evidence of limitation. It's evidence of depth. Your nervous system is not under-functioning. It is fully functioning, more fully in many moments than the nervous systems around you. When you leave the party early, you're not failing to enjoy life. You're making a practical decision about a finite resource. You can't run that many processes indefinitely without a cost. No one can. You simply know your cost better and reach it more honestly. Maybe you've spent years pretending the cost wasn't there, staying longer than you should, smiling past the moment when the room became too much, going home and needing 2 days to feel like yourself again, and calling that weakness. It isn't weakness. It's the consequence of asking a highly calibrated instrument to operate in conditions it wasn't designed for, indefinitely, without rest. Highly sensitive people notice more. They process more. They feel more of what a room contains. And that depth, the same depth that makes crowds so costly, is the same depth that makes them remarkable in quieter, more intimate spaces. One-on-one, in nature, in focus, in creative solitude, not despite their sensitivity, because of it. You don't need to fix this, you need to understand it. And the understanding is enough to change everything. The next time you leave early, you're not escaping, you're choosing. The next time a crowd exhausts you, you're not failing, you're responding accurately. The next time someone says you should get out more, you can know something quietly and completely. You are not less than them. You are differently calibrated. And that calibration has served the species for longer than cities have existed. You don't have to love crowds. You're not required to. You never were. Some people are wired to thrive in noise. Some are wired to thrive in its absence. Neither is broken. Both are needed. You have always been paying attention to everything, to what wasn't said, to the shift in the air, to the feeling under the feeling. That's not your flaw, that's your function. You are not someone who needs fixing. You are someone who notices. Crowds take from you because you give more to them. More attention, more processing, more of yourself than most people ever realize. That isn't weakness, that's depth. Not broken, not difficult, not too much, precise. You were always just precise. If this reached something real in you, I want to ask you something. What is the one environment where you feel most completely yourself? Not just comfortable, but genuinely, fully alive. Where your sensitivity stops being a cost and becomes something that serves you. Share it in the comments, because the answer might be exactly what someone else is still searching for. I'll be reading everyone